أكيد من خلال ملتقى شباب المعرفة هناك وقت مميز لاستماع لتجارب الشباب من خلال الجلسة التي سوف تبدأ حالاً. شكراً لتعاونكم والتزامكم ووجودكم أيضاً. حضورنا الكريم، أكيد هي كثيرة الفعاليات المصاحبة لملتقى شباب المعرفة، ففي هناك مجموعة من التجارب وقصص النجاح يعرضها الشباب المشاركين من خلال تواجدهم في هذا الحدث عبر القاعات المتواجدة في الطابق الأول، فنرجو منكم أكيد زيارتهم والاستمتاع بقصص النجاح.
Before we go on, I would like to bring your attention to the success stories that are being shared in the first floor.
أما الآن فحان موعد الجلسة الثالثة مع حلقات شبابية تناقش التعليم الواقعي والافتراضي وتتناول محاور التعليم في الميتافيرس ودور الحكومات في التعليم والاعتماد الأكاديمي فيما يخص التعليم الافتراضي والتكنولوجيا من عدمها من التعليم. وتستضيف الجلسة مجموعة من المتحدثين الشباب، ويسعدنا أن نرحب بكل من محمد عبد الله الشامسي، أحمد محمد الياسي، عبد الله أحمد الشيخ، وتدير الجلسة عضو مجلس دبي للشباب أسماء البلوشي.
It is time for the third session with the youth circle discussing in-person versus virtual education in Metaverse, the government's role in educating academic accreditation of virtual education, and whether to use technology or not in education. The session hosts young speakers, namely Muhammad Abdullah Shamsi, Ahmed Muhammad Ilyasi, and Abdullah Ahmed Al-Sheikh. The session is moderated by Asma Al-Blushi, a member of the Dubai Youth Council.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته أصحاب المعالي.
May peace be upon you, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, your highness. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome everyone. I am pleased to meet you all at the Knowledge Youth Forum, the platform that brings together the knowledge and internal leaders. Welcome to all of you here with me. I am Asma Al-Blushi. This session of youth seminar entitled Real and Virtual Education. The speakers are an elite group of UAE Youth Forum, of the Dubai Youth Council and the Ministry of Education Council, and they will enrich this session with their decisions, opinions and outcomes. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you, the youth, here in this panel of discussion, and we will discuss the face-to-face or the subject of real face-to-face and virtual education. So virtual education is that the learner will receive teaching lessons and lessons online and create virtual education platforms and achieve the integration of technology into education. And I want to hear the beginning, the youth's opinion about the real life and virtual education. I would like to give the platform to my colleague Mohammed. Real and virtual education has been accelerated through the coronavirus pandemic. This is not a secret, but we have noticed some positives and negatives that have been probably linked to the virtual world, since we are somehow or somewhat accustomed to the virtual education, or to the idea that virtual education is only an image of somebody explaining, and we just press the next button until we redo the same test 4 or 5, 10 times again until we get to the phrase that says, "Thank you, you've done it, congratulations." But we have noticed some of today's practices in some countries in the East that virtual reality or virtual world or augmented virtual reality is tested more positively if it is related to a novel, especially if this novel is linked to the metaverse. Today, I'm growing the skill through experience, and how can I develop a skill in youth or the Arab youth or a foreign young person today, or otherwise by practice in a particular profession. Traditional reality can only be done theoretically, and how can we bring them into a practical science through the virtual world? My dear colleague Mohammed, you have directly entered into a subject of metaverse and the virtual world, and it's clear that the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated virtual education, and the UAE has succeeded by providing the technical infrastructure to move forward with this concept. But the question is it really that the presence of technology today, or technology in the educational process, is actually considered a strength, or there are challenges for the learners to face in this process? Thank you, dear colleague Asman. I would like to welcome everybody. I would like to welcome the brothers, sisters and the youth, the excellencies and highnesses. I am glad to be with you at the session, and of course we have to highlight the efforts of the UAE to capture the opportunities. The coronavirus pandemic was a challenge, but under our wiser leadership, led by His Highness the President and Vice President of the UAE, we have transformed the challenges into opportunities. Education Forum a distance has been one of the elements of success that we have been able to achieve based on the flexibility of the UAE government in facing the changes that surrounds us in health session sector and others, and it became now an opportunity. Nowadays, the UAE became one of the top countries in the world based on the underrating of the UNRDD on flexibility. Dubai became now one of the 52 cities in the world that has been rated as a flexible city that has achieved distance or online education and the use of technology in education. This is also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and these are all competitive indicators for the UAE through it, and we proved that the UAE government and the UAE Emirates have the flexibility. If we are talking about the education sector, all the possibilities for education have been facilitated. We are talking today about the levels of education, whether through schools or universities or also through kindergartens, for which the UAE has facilitated all the capabilities, whether in the government sector or private sector, in ensuring the continuity of education in our sector, such as my dear colleague, brother Mohammed has said. Today we'll look at the cities of the world when we do a reference comparison. Which are the cities in the world that offer things to the youth? We found that the UAE government and Dubai and the other Emirates are on top of these countries, offering all possibilities for education. And when we look at the competitive indicators, makes it possible to provide and measure these possibilities in youths. This episode can be an opportunity to hear from the youths themselves what their experience of education has been, rather than being informed about practices, and say that these are competitive results of today's models of youth who have been able to live through these crises, and see what are the success stories they come up with, or what opportunities they have in the challenge of the corona pandemic in hastening technology for distance learning. Doctor, do you see that the presence of technology nowadays in the educational system is considered to be a strength for educational system, because the student can study remotely, not only in schools but also in universities? They can study remotely outside of the country as well. Indeed, it is true. We have seen the youth students who studied abroad through our participations in our sessions that we have held in tech exhibitions, and we have seen those students and their experiences, and then we have compared their experiences with the youth here in the country, and we've compared the results and measured them. Thank you, Doctor. The Minister of Education mentioned that the topic of virtual education will not only be the whole system, but there is a part of real or face-to-face education that will enter or take place with virtual education and enhance the educational process as well as face-to-face education. Is the sound clear? Indeed, I praise this saying, and when you ask the doctor whether distance education or learning is a power or not, I expect that this lies in the extent of our vision of this relation. If we see this relation as a replacement for face-to-face education or learning, of course it won't be considered as a strength. In this situation, it would rather create lots of other gaps. But if we perceive it as that they complement each other or complete each other, here it would be a force. I would like to ask the audience today, when you were a child, and I would come to you and tell you, I'm going to teach you the characteristics of the palm tree, would you rather see it through a virtual metaverse, or would you go to a trip and touch the palm tree yourself and taste the dates and engage your senses with it? Here I see the real gap between virtual education and face-to-face education. Virtual education works on all senses, but if we focus on this nowadays, we find that it depends on hearing and sight, or audio and visual, and we lose an entire generation of people who involve the educational process with their other senses, such as touch and smell. These things exist in nature, and they try to put it on the virtual world and keep it up with it. But until then, there is a need for integration between virtual education and face-to-face education or learning. I prepared a question before about how virtual education can affect student skills, and you have mentioned that we have to promote virtual education with the face-to-face education. Thank you very much indeed. How can we verify through virtual education? You have mentioned that we have to integrate virtual education with face-to-face or merge them both together. How can we check the measure, how can we check or measure the understanding of the students on the virtual platform or spectre? First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for the audience and the organizers. Regarding your question, my sister Asma, of course, as my friend had mentioned before, there is a gap between virtual education and face-to-face education, as the student does not participate or learn with his full senses. But I expected that the second point that we will mention is the metaverse, which will be the performance that covers all these shortcomings and negative points currently exists in the virtual education, which we are seeing now through hearing and sight. At the moment, is the metaverse able to develop the student's skills and ability in learning or education? Actually, this can extend our ability to measure his skills. It does not develop his skills as much as we extend our ability to measure. And today, if we think about the use of technology in general, we are focusing or talking about the big data. Nowadays, when I collect data of a student about the extent of his interaction participation and about how he engages his skills and his understanding, when I study all of these relationships, I will have a greater ability to measure his intelligence and measure his skills, and therefore we develop plans that suit each learner individually, and this helps to measure and that help to develop the programs and modules that we have. By editing the student's data, we will be able to measure his understanding and ability. But we will answer the question, with the presence of metaverse, can we dispense the face-to-face education? As well as my brother Hamad has mentioned, they both complete each other. Today we talk about knowledge, but of course we don't forget the role of skill, which is very needed today in the labor market. Some of the models that are being taught theoretically at the moment, they are being completed by metaverse and other techniques to develop skills. So it's called the hybrid learning, so face-to-face plus the online learning, yes. Of course, in terms of measuring the extent of the outputs and the students' understanding, there are many technologies that currently merge with metaverse, such as AI techniques. A while ago I was in an entrepreneurial program, and one of the creative entrepreneurs has created a special programming that goes into a camera of CCTV and measures the student or recipient's understanding of the material that he has learned. Anything else? I'm going to talk about a personal experience. When I was studying my master's degree in political science in New York for the first year. The first year we studied in New York, and we were on a vacation. Then the coronavirus started, so we couldn't go back to study there. Because of that, we continued our studies online, and here I can compare two parts. The opportunity that we had benefited from. We have been able to do distance and face-to-face education. But we have lost the personal experience in which we sit with students And doctors, even after finishing studies, there is a second part we missed after studying from a distance, and what I took advantage from. The lesson started at 2 o'clock at night because of the difference time in between 2 o'clock. So between us and them. So virtual education solves a lot of problems, but at the same time we lose these experiences of mixing or interacting with people and the culture and the personal relationships between students and other students and the students and other professors. You've mentioned that you lost your personal experience and the field in which you were, and this audience shifted to studying online. My question in response to what you have mentioned, is it really true that because of virtual education, the students will lose some of their behaviors and personal experiences? Because there is a study that I read that says if we rely on virtual education during the next 10 or 20 years, we will have a defect in behavior and lose some values. Like you've mentioned, it's all about hearing and memorizing, and that's it. Could this affect the student's social behavior? As you have mentioned before, what the student misses most in this regard is the behavior, values, and interaction, as my brother Abdullah has mentioned. The most attentive, or the most thing that attracted my attention since I was a member of the Students' Council, we hear a lot of opinions from students. When the student is behind the screen, he does not think about sitting with people, and he does not think about someone watching him, looking him in the eye and talking to him or interacting with him. There is no communication, no interaction. He's behind the screen as if there is a barrier between him and another person. He does not need to learn discourse and speech and discussion and conversation. Secondly, the most common thing that we have encountered is that the students sometimes get bored. But if he's in class, he can, for example, discuss with the student that is sitting next to him, and he would meet a new person, he would add something to his knowledge, and while the student is taking notes, he might ask the person next to him, can you tell me what was the point that I missed, and so on and so forth. The lecturer, the professor or the doctor who gives the lecture and explains the courses, maybe he doesn't have the full ability to give, or will not have the full skills to explain. So the student in this situation can lose focus and not engage in a discussion with a professor, because I cannot interrupt him at any moment because he's online. So there are lots of downsides, but this helps students in so many other sides, because they will be able to attend from anywhere, wherever the circumstances are, and any student can enter without missing anything in the program or the course he is in. Thank you very much for your intervention. Thank you about social behaviors that can be changed in a student through the use of virtual education, connecting it to the Metaverse point. And can the Metaverse theme or subject be able to solve this problem? Let's talk first about the social behavior or the social person. It can be different between one generation and another, where the next generations can see themselves more socially in the virtual world. The definition is different for our current generation, and we certainly see that they miss the joy of life more, but for them, from their perspective, they will see that this is a normal thing, and they are doing things and enjoying life and enjoy all the things that they are doing since they were young. Regarding communication with students, there are also avatars in the metaverse that represent the students. Just as Muhammad sits on my left in the metaverse, his avatar also sits on my left. Also, the movement of his hand and the body language that Muhammad makes, I can notice it for sure. Of course, there will be a gap in the real world, but in the virtual world, this interaction will be present. I want to add something to that. Life skills related to reading, speaking, listening, and etc. These same skills can be changed from one generation to another. But it's very important for a student, once he enters the university, once he has a presentation and researches, what does he do? There are positive and negative aspects of virtual education. Moving on to the second point of the discussion, which is the role of governments and their support for the system of virtual education. Of course, before the pandemic, there was a plan for the UAE and the Ministry of Education to implement virtual education. But the COVID pandemic accelerated this program, and at present, education is considered the core of any development process. It is one of the most important sectors and under variables that occur in technology and progresses that is happening at all sectors. We must keep pace and not apply virtual education even if it has negative aspects. But the question that I want to clarify, what is the role of governments today in promoting development through virtual reality or the use of technology and artificial intelligence? Does the government have a role given that education today is a vital field and core of development? Please. For this question, I will highlight two sides, honestly, and we have noticed them during the pandemic and how the UAE was able to contain virtual education. First of all, Abu Dhabi 42, and many of you may have heard about it, which is a school without a teacher, and the idea is based on virtual education and based on adapted learning. The beautiful thing that we will associate today with virtual education is adapted learning. What is the idea of adapted learning? For example, Muhammad is better than me in certain skills. So the questions that are prepared to him are more challenging than the questions that are prepared to me, due to the fact that his level is higher. So the students do not have to be in the same level. Depending on your level, you can be better than me and gain knowledge according to your level. This is the focus of the UAE. The second point that I also noticed, which is a real example, it's the Aleph platform, which is a platform launched by UAE today that started serving in the UAE. It's serving the UAE, but today it's serving other countries such as Indonesia and the United States and so on and so forth. This is an honor for us as an Emirati youth because of our local achievements are now exported abroad. The idea of virtual education was supported by the government from the beginning before the pandemic, and today it has become continuous, and it is beautiful to exploit the point of adapted learning, as I mentioned. I expect that there is an aspect of adaptation of education according to the qualifications. Today you will be with your friend in class who has a handicap. He might be a colorblind and so on and so forth. So how can technology harness the education process for these youth, as well as the speed of learning itself, as mentioned by my brother Hamdan? With the adapted learning, each one can learn at a certain speed compared to the other. The government's role, in our view, is to strengthen the traditional method by using technology to gain the positives from both sides of the coin. I was thinking about the role of governments. Is it possible in the future we will hear about the comprehensive employee who works in lots of things? Can we today see him as a comprehensive student who studies in the UAE but studies with another student is in a second country? Is it possible to apply this idea by virtue of the use of technologies and artificial intelligence, due to the presence of Metaverse today and the acceleration of governments to implement this technology, I expect that this will be very soon. It is possible that today we have already complemented or completed the exchange programs. They would do a course in one university, they go back to their original university and they graduate from it. There is an exchange of students, but today we are close to the existence of distance classes. As my brother Hamdan spoke about the school in Abu Dhabi, the educational institution in Abu Dhabi, which is a school without a teacher, and there can be virtual universities without having a large physical entity that contains a large number of students, especially in the West, where there are universities with more than 50,000 students. These universities today have all taken advantage of the pandemic to transform into distance education. I expect that international programs will have very soon virtual classes in which students are present from more than one country. There are lots of challenges, but they create opportunities in additional skills for us. How can today the student gain from his educational experience with students from another country and exchange knowledge among them, even if it was from a distance? But today the Metaverse would allow us to live under one roof. Today I can travel from one country to another, and for this reason I believe that the UAE is one of the top countries that have taken a long step in applying Metaverse with all the services provided by the government and the educational systems. Does anyone have anything to add, please? Thank you, Doctor, for your answer to my question regarding whether if it is possible that we see in the future a comprehensive student who studies in the UAE, but at the same time studies in many other countries while using these technologies. We have spoken about the Metaverse, and you have said that the Metaverse can solve the gap or bridge the gap in measuring the success of the student and what is the extent of his understanding, and we also spoken about his skills. My question now is about the existing technology and the existing technical and technological development in the UAE. I think the UAE has a strategy for the Metaverse, and it has other strategies for technologies, and this helps the Ministry of Education to develop the educational system using virtual education. But the question is, are we really ready today for this stage? Or do we need a longer period of time to train, educate, and qualify students more in this field? Of course, education in the Metaverse, and whether if we are ready today for this or not, there is a point I want to state. We have adopted this idea before COVID, as my dear colleague has said. Because, pardon? I just want to go gradually. Our wise leadership had a 50 years vision for the future until 2071 to be the best country in the world in terms of education. What does it mean to be pioneers in education? As I saw when the pandemic first started, we were ready for it as we worked on it before, and now we are in the stage of transferring virtual education from the sense of hearing and seeing only into the second level to interact more in education. Currently, we are applying this regard to our universities in the field of Metaverse, such as Hamdan Smart University, which has a curricula in Metaverse, but at the government level we have not implemented this yet, but we are working on it, and I expect that we will be ready as soon as possible. Are you talking about readiness in schools, not universities, right? Indeed. My next question is, if we are ready to implement Metaverse at virtual educational with the face-to-face education in the schools, will this be for university or complete the university education in the university? Because is it complementary to it? Because today there is a problem regarding academic accreditation. There are universities that do not recognize virtual education and say, what guarantees me that the student has succeeded a success rate? And if the measurement ratio was correct for virtual education, of course, as I told you, my sister Asma, we are a leading country in education, and when we are pioneers in a specific field, we will face challenges. One of the challenges, as you've mentioned, is academic accreditation. And after a while, we will cover these challenges or solve these existing problems in order to comply with this global standard for virtual education to be globally adopted. I hope so. There is anything to add? There is only an advice or a piece of advice to youth to look always as the government of the UAE has prepared us. And by virtue of the experience that we have taken and by virtue of the grace of our presence in our dear country, and always make opportunities out of any challenges and not view any challenges as a point of weakness or negativity. We always look at the positivity and challenges and turn challenges into opportunities, just as the UAE has succeeded under our wise leadership in transforming all challenges into opportunities. Is there any addition? Would you like to add something? I just wanted to talk about the subject of readiness for schools. A while ago, there was an award that was evaluated by schools in the Arab Gulf. However, we are evaluating schools, and we have noticed that the award was at the time of the pandemic, and the criteria that were set for the award focused on the methods and techniques. It means a complete standard that talks about the modern technologies used in the student education. We saw a lot of skills, and the teachers themselves were suggesting, and they had the opportunity to set new indicators to add to the school. And there was flexibility to change their indicators and make them commensurate with the situation that happened. And we've had 3 schools that excelled greatly at the level of the Gulf. Of course, the topic is very rich. If we talk about it in detail, we will take a long time. We are talking about the negatives and the positives and the impact, whether on society and on the behavior of the student, then the mental health, and it is very, very large and ramified. I would like to thank my brothers and sisters from Dubai Youth Council and the Ministry of Education Council. Thank you very much to our honorable presence audience, and we will meet again in the future meetings. But before I conclude, I would like to hear any suggestions or idea regarding education until we finish this session. Education must be continuous development, and the person himself must strive, persevere and struggle, and a very hard-working person will reach his goals at the end. My sister Asma, in a hurry or in brief, it is correct that the education system enhances the qualification of a student, but today, as a youth, as a young person, what am I going to offer for myself today? I have to look for the opportunity and prepare myself, because there are skills today that I do not to acquire from sitting in the seat to study, like me, like 30 students, but what do I add to myself? I will reflect it on the society. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks to all of you, and we will meet you again in upcoming youth circles.